Have you ever stopped and thought, what would happen if the power just never came back on? No lights, no heat, no gas pumps, no internet, no cell service. Not for an hour, not for a day, but for weeks, maybe even months. Because let's be real, some states are already dangling on the edge of a total energy crisis, and 2025 might be the year the plug gets pulled for good. Aging power grids crumbling under pressure, extreme weather events wiping out entire regions, energy shortages forcing rolling blackouts, and government mismanagement turning a fixable problem into an unstoppable catastrophe. These aren't just random outages. These are the warning signs of a full-scale power collapse. We surveyed over 3,500 Americans, from urban city dwellers to off-grid preppers, and asked them, which states are at the highest risk of a devastating blackout in 2025? Some of their answers will confirm your worst fears. Others might leave you speechless. But here's the kicker. If you live in one of these states, you need to prepare now. This is Preppers Community, and today we're counting down the first 10 states that will face a massive blackout in 2025. And trust me, you'll want to see which state takes the #1 spot. Because what's coming is bigger, darker, and far worse than anyone expects. Before we get into it, do yourself a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to Preppers Community, and turn on notifications so you never miss an urgent update like this. Now let's get started. Number 10, Colorado. Colorado's breathtaking mountain landscapes may look like a paradise, but beneath that beauty lies a power crisis waiting to happen. The state's aging electrical grid is barely holding together, struggling to keep up with a growing population and an increasing demand for power. And when the system fails, which it has repeatedly, residents are left to fend for themselves in brutal, unforgiving conditions. Extreme winter storms have already caused catastrophic outages in recent years, leaving tens of thousands without heat in sub-zero temperatures. And with 2025 predicted to bring even harsher and more frequent winter events, experts warn that rolling blackouts could become the norm rather than the exception. But winter isn't the only threat. Wildfires have devastated entire communities, forcing mass evacuations and destroying power infrastructure beyond repair. The 2020 fire season alone torched over 1 million acres statewide, leaving thousands stranded without electricity, clean water, or communication for weeks. Colorado also suffers from limited energy storage, meaning that when the power goes out, there's no quick solution. No backup, no cushion, no second chances. If the grid collapses during a winter storm, survival stops being about comfort. It becomes a fight for your life. If you live in Colorado, don't wait for disaster to strike. Get serious about alternative heating sources, backup generators, and off-grid power solutions. Because here, a blackout doesn't just leave you in the dark. It can be the difference between life and death. Number 9, Georgia. Georgia is sitting on the edge of an energy disaster. And if 2025 delivers the perfect storm, millions could be plunged into chaos overnight. The state has already suffered multiple large-scale power grid failures in recent years, and experts warn that the worst is yet to come. If you thought previous outages were bad, what's coming could make them look like minor inconveniences. The heart of the problem? Atlanta's electrical grid is already at full capacity, and it's being stretched beyond its limits as the population explodes. The system is old, fragile, and underfunded, meaning it wouldn't take much, a major storm, a cyber attack, or an unexpected surge in demand, for the entire grid to buckle under the pressure. And when that happens, it won't just be a few neighborhoods going dark. We're talking entire cities, counties, and possibly the whole state shutting down for days, or even weeks. And then there's the perfect storm of climate threats. Georgia is one of the most hurricane-prone states in the country, and when a powerful storm barrels through, the power grid gets shredded like paper. But hurricanes aren't the only concern. The state also faces record-breaking heat waves that push temperatures well into the triple digits, making electricity a literal lifeline. When the AC fails, when refrigeration stops working, when the water pumps shut down, what do you think happens next? The truth is, Georgia's energy consumption is growing faster than its ability to produce power. The demand is exploding, but the supply isn't keeping up. And when supply doesn't meet demand, rolling blackouts aren't just a possibility. They're inevitable. If you live in Georgia, you need to stop thinking of this as a what-if scenario. A total blackout is coming. The only question is, will you be ready? Because when the lights go out, when the heat becomes unbearable, when gas stations shut down and grocery stores empty out, survival will belong to those who planned ahead. Number 8, Michigan. Did you know that Michigan ranks among the worst states in the nation for power outages? And here's the scary part. It's only going to get worse. Michigan's power grid is a disaster waiting to happen. Outdated power lines, crumbling infrastructure, and a dependence on an unreliable, failing system mean that when the power goes out here, it doesn't just flicker back on, it can stay off for weeks. Winter storms have already crippled entire cities, leaving tens of thousands of residents without heat, light, or running water in dangerously low temperatures. And with experts predicting more extreme and frequent blizzards in 2025, the odds of another catastrophic grid failure are higher than ever. But here's what makes it even worse. The government has done almost nothing to fix the problem. Energy experts have been sounding the alarm for years, warning that Michigan's power grid is one bad storm away from total collapse. But instead of investing in major upgrades, politicians have kicked the can down the road, patching up issues instead of solving them. And it's not just the winter storms. Michigan is also vulnerable to severe thunderstorms, heavy flooding, and even tornadoes, all of which have taken down large sections of the grid in the past. Each year, residents brace for another wave of blackouts, hoping they'll be the lucky ones who don't get stuck in the dark for days or even weeks. So here's the bottom line. If you live in Michigan, waiting for the government to fix the grid is not an option. The next major outage isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Stockpile supplies, get alternative heat sources, have backup power, because when the blackout comes, there's no telling how long it'll last. Number 7, Texas. We all remember the nightmare of 2021. Texas was plunged into darkness, millions left freezing in their homes, pipes bursting, grocery store shelves stripped bare. Hundreds of lives were lost. And guess what? Nothing has changed. Texas still operates on its own independent power grid, separate from the rest of the country. While that may sound like a good thing, in reality it means there's no backup when disaster strikes. The entire system is vulnerable, and when demand surges, whether from scorching triple-digit summers or another deadly deep freeze, the grid simply cannot handle it. Experts have been sounding the alarm. Texas is still one extreme weather event away from another catastrophic blackout. And this time, it could be even worse. Here's the brutal truth. Energy shortages in Texas are a growing threat. The state's population is booming, meaning more homes, more businesses, and more strain on an already fragile system. Every year, the risks of rolling blackouts and total grid failures increase. And let's not forget, when the power goes out in Texas, it's not just an inconvenience. Extreme heat waves have killed more people in the state than hurricanes and floods combined. And when another winter storm hits, the state's energy infrastructure is still just as fragile as it was in 2021. Texans, you've been warned. The next blackout isn't a possibility, it's a certainty. You need a backup power source, a heat plan for winter, a cooling strategy for summer, a stockpile of supplies. Because when the lights go out in Texas, you're on your own. No one is coming to save you. Number 6, California. California might be the 5th largest economy in the world, but its power grid is an absolute disaster, and it's only getting worse. Every single year, wildfires, heat waves, and extreme weather slam the state, forcing blackouts that leave millions stranded in the dark. And what's the government's solution? Rolling blackouts? That's right. In California, you don't even need a disaster to lose power. The state is already rationing electricity because the grid can't handle demand. One minute you're watching TV, the next your entire neighborhood is shut down for hours or even days without warning. Let's talk wildfires. California's dry, overgrown forests have turned into tinderboxes. And when power lines spark, entire towns burn to the ground. In fact, some of the worst wildfires in California's history were started by power companies, leading to forced shutdowns just to prevent another catastrophe. But here's the problem. When the power is shut off, hospitals lose backup systems, water pumps stop working, and grocery stores can't refrigerate food. The entire system breaks down. And it's not just the wildfires. Heat waves are pushing California's power grid past the breaking point. Every summer, the state sets new record highs. And every summer, the power grid buckles under the pressure. And with 2025 expected to bring even more extreme heat, the chances of total grid failure are climbing fast. The reality? Millions of Californians are already scrambling to survive. Backup generators, solar panels, and off-grid solutions are becoming the norm just to keep homes running when the grid inevitably collapses. But here's the thing. Not everyone can afford those options. And when the next blackout hits, those who didn't prepare will be left helpless. If you live in California, the clock is ticking. Don't wait for the next wildfire, the next heat wave, or the next forced blackout to leave you stranded. Get your off-grid solutions ready now. Because in California, losing power isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Number 5. Louisiana. Hurricane season in Louisiana isn't just a problem, it's a relentless yearly nightmare. This state is in the direct path of some of the most powerful and destructive storms in the country. And when they strike, the power grid isn't just damaged, it's annihilated. Power outages here aren't measured in hours or days. They can last weeks. Entire regions go dark, leaving families stranded without air conditioning, refrigeration, clean water, or emergency services. And if you think the state has found a way to fix this ongoing crisis, think again. Louisiana's power grid is one of the weakest in the country, and every time a new storm hits, it only gets worse. Hurricane Ida in 2021 left over 1 million people without power for weeks, with some areas taking over a month to restore electricity. And let's not forget Hurricane Katrina, which caused one of the longest and most devastating blackouts in U.S. history. The brutal reality? Nothing has changed. And the problem goes beyond just hurricanes. Louisiana's infrastructure is barely holding together. Old power lines, overloaded transformers, and a failing energy grid mean that even regular thunderstorms can knock out power for thousands. Add in the rising threat of coastal flooding, extreme heat, and an aging electrical network that can't keep up with demand, and what do you get? The perfect recipe for a total blackout disaster. If you live in Louisiana, you cannot afford to be unprepared. When the next massive storm barrels through, it's not a question of if the power will go out. It's a question of how long you'll be left in the dark. Stock up on emergency power solutions, backup generators, and long-term supplies. Because when the grid fails in Louisiana, help isn't coming anytime soon. Number 4. Florida. Florida might look like a tropical paradise, but when hurricane season arrives, it becomes ground zero for some of the worst power outages in the country. The state's power grid isn't built to withstand back-to-back catastrophic storms, and every year, millions of residents are thrown into survival mode as entire cities are left in the dark. And here's the reality. Hurricanes aren't just a seasonal threat anymore. They're getting stronger, more frequent, and more unpredictable. Scientists are already warning that 2025 could bring some of the most devastating storms in recent history. And when they hit Florida, the power grid is going to collapse like a house of cards. When the power goes out in Florida, it's not just about losing lights, it's about brutal, relentless heat. The humidity skyrockets, homes turn into ovens, and without air conditioning, heat stroke becomes a life-threatening risk. And if you think local utilities will restore power quickly, think again. After Hurricane Ian in 2022, over 2.5 million Floridians were left in the dark, with some areas waiting weeks to get back online. But here's the bigger issue. Florida is running out of options. Rising sea levels and coastal erosion are wiping out power infrastructure, flooding substations and transformers, and making each blackout harder to recover from. The power companies can't keep up, and the grid is one direct hit away from a failure Florida may never fully recover from. In 2025, the risks will be higher than ever. If you live in Florida, this is your wake-up call. Get your home hurricane-proofed, secure an emergency power source, and stockpile supplies now. Because when the next massive storm slams into Florida, no one knows when the lights will come back on. Number 3. New York. New York is the financial capital of the world, home to over 19 million people, a city that never sleeps. But what happens when the lights go out for good? New York's power grid is dangerously outdated, struggling to support one of the highest population densities in the country. And with 2025 shaping up to be a year of extreme weather and rising energy demand, experts warn that a full-scale blackout isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Winter storms slam the state every year, bringing freezing temperatures, heavy snowfall, and ice buildup that snap power lines like twigs. In past years, entire boroughs of New York City have been left without electricity for days, and rural areas? They're often in the dark for weeks. But winter isn't the only threat. Heat waves have been pushing the grid to its breaking point, with summer power demand soaring to record highs. Air conditioners strain the system, transformers overheat and explode, and suddenly, entire sections of the city go dark. In 2019, a massive blackout plunged Midtown Manhattan into chaos, proving just how fragile New York's energy system really is. And here's the worst part. The government isn't fixing it fast enough. The city's power infrastructure was never designed to handle the population it has today. And the longer they delay critical upgrades, the bigger the disaster waiting to happen. The reality? New York is just one major storm, heat wave, or grid failure away from a historic, widespread blackout. And when that happens, it won't just be about the inconvenience of losing power. It'll mean subways shutting down, hospitals running on fumes, water systems failing, and millions of people left stranded in the dark. If you live in New York, now is the time to prepare. Stock up on emergency lighting, backup power sources, and enough supplies to last longer than you think you'll need. Because when the next massive blackout hits, New York won't just be the city that never sleeps. It'll be the city that never sees the light. Number 2, Illinois. Illinois is home to Chicago, one of the largest cities in America, a major financial and industrial hub. But behind the skyline and bustling streets, the state's power grid is hanging by a thread. Chicago alone has experienced some of the worst blackouts in recent history, with millions losing power during brutal winter storms, extreme summer heat waves, and infrastructure failures. And experts are warning that 2025 could bring some of the most devastating outages yet. Let's break it down. Illinois' power grid is aging, overburdened, and underfunded. Many of the transmission lines and substations haven't been significantly upgraded in decades, meaning the system is weaker than ever. Every summer, energy demand surges beyond capacity, leading to rolling blackouts that leave thousands of homes and businesses in the dark. And every winter, heavy snowfall, ice storms, and Arctic blasts knock out power lines, leaving residents to endure freezing temperatures without heat for days on end. And then there's the financial crisis hitting Illinois' energy sector. Rising energy costs have driven power companies into debt, forcing them to delay much-needed repairs and upgrades to the grid. That means when disaster strikes, restoration efforts take longer, and more people are left without power for extended periods. The worst part? Illinois is one of the most extreme weather-prone states in the Midwest. From violent thunderstorms to tornadoes, deep freezes to heat waves, every season brings a new and unpredictable threat to the power grid. And in 2025, experts predict even more severe climate conditions, making the likelihood of long-lasting blackouts higher than ever. If you live in Illinois, you cannot afford to wait.
The grid is already stretched past its limits, and when it finally breaks, restoration could take longer than anyone expects.
Stock up on backup power solutions, emergency supplies, and alternative heating and cooling methods. Because when Illinois' grid goes down, you don't want to be the one left scrambling in the dark. Number 1, Pennsylvania. And at the top of the list, Pennsylvania. This state is facing a perfect storm of energy disasters. Crippling winter storms, increasing energy shortages, and one of the most outdated power grids in the country. Experts warn that Pennsylvania is at the highest risk of a statewide blackout in 2025, and when it happens, it could take weeks to restore power.
Winter in Pennsylvania is brutal, and the grid simply isn't built to handle it.
Ice storms, heavy snowfall, and sub-zero temperatures put extreme strain on an already failing energy system, causing transformers to explode, power lines to snap, and entire towns to go dark for extended periods. And every year it's getting worse. But the biggest concern? Energy shortages. Pennsylvania has long been a major producer of electricity. But grid mismanagement, outdated infrastructure, and rising energy costs have put the state in serious danger of not being able to meet demand. As more people rely on electric heating during the winter and air conditioning during the increasingly hot summers, rolling blackouts are becoming a terrifying new reality. The question isn't if Pennsylvania will face a massive blackout in 2025, it's when. And when the lights go out, will you be ready? If your state was on this list, now is the time to prepare. Get your backup power solutions, emergency supplies, and alternative heating and cooling sources ready before it's too late. Hit that like button if you found this video helpful. Subscribe to Preppers Community for more urgent updates on survival, prepping, and crisis preparedness. Drop a comment below. What's your backup plan for a blackout? Stay prepared.
Stay vigilant.
And we'll see you in the next video.